An exclusive economic zone is a sea zone prescribed by the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, over which a state has special rights regarding the exploration and use of marine resources, including energy production from water and wind. It stretches from the baseline out to 200 nautical miles from its coast. In colloquial usage, the term may include the continental shelf. The term does not include either the territorial sea or the continental shelf beyond the 200 nmi limit. The difference between the territorial sea and the exclusive economic zone is that the first confers full sovereignty over the waters, whereas the second is merely a sovereign right, which refers to the coastal state's rights below the surface of the sea. The surface waters, as can be seen in the map, are international waters. Definition: generally, a state's exclusive economic zone is an area beyond and adjacent to the territorial sea, extending seaward to a distance of no more than 200 nautical miles out from its coastal baseline. The exception to this rule occurs when exclusive economic zones would overlap, that is, state coastal baselines are less than 400 nautical miles apart. When an overlap occurs, it is up to the states to delineate the actual maritime boundary. Generally, any point within an overlapping area defaults to the nearest state. A state's exclusive economic zone starts at the seaward edge of its territorial sea and extends outward to a distance of 200 nautical miles from the baseline. The exclusive economic zone stretches much further into sea than the territorial waters, which end at 12 nmi from the coastal baseline. Thus, the exclusive economic zones includes the contiguous zone. States also have rights to the seabed of what is called the continental shelf up to 350 nautical miles from the coastal baseline, beyond the exclusive economic zones, but such areas are not part of their exclusive economic zones. The legal definition of the continental shelf does not directly correspond to the geological meaning of the term, as it also includes the continental rise and slope, and the entire seabed within the exclusive economic zone. Origin: the idea of allotting nations EEZs to give them more control of maritime affairs outside territorial limits gained acceptance in the late 20th century. Initially, a country's sovereign territorial waters extended 3 nautical miles or 6 kilometers beyond the shore. In modern times, a country's sovereign territorial waters extend to 12 nautical miles beyond the shore. One of the first assertions of exclusive jurisdiction beyond the traditional territorial seas was made by the United States in the Truman Proclamation of September 28, 1945. However, it was Chile and Peru respectively that first claimed maritime zones of 200 nautical miles, with the Presidential Declaration concerning Continental Shelf of 23 June 1947 and Presidential Decree No. 781 of 1 August 1947. It was not until 1982, with the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, that the 200 nautical mile exclusive economic zone was formally adopted as Part 5, Article 55 of the Convention states, specific legal regime of the exclusive economic zone. The exclusive economic zone is an area beyond and adjacent to the territorial sea, subject to the specific legal regime established in this part, under which the rights and jurisdiction of the coastal state and the rights and freedoms of other states are governed by the relevant provisions of this convention. Disputes: the exact extent of exclusive economic zones is a common source of conflicts between states over marine waters. One well-known example of such dispute was the Cod Wars between the United Kingdom and Iceland. Norway and Russia dispute both territorial sea and EEZ with regard to the Svalbard archipelago, as it affects Russia's EEZ due to its unique treaty status. A treaty was agreed in principle in April 2010 between the two states and subsequently ratified, resolving this demarcation dispute. The agreement was signed in Murmansk on September 15, 2010. The South China Sea is the site of an ongoing dispute between several neighboring nations. Croatia's ZERP in the Adriatic Sea caused friction with Italy and Slovenia and caused problems during Croatia's accession to the European Union. A wedge-shaped section of the Beaufort Sea is disputed between Canada and the United States, as the area reportedly contains substantial oil reserves. France claims a portion of Canada's EEZ for Saint-Pierre-et-Miquelon based on a new definition of the continental shelf and EEZ between the two countries. Saint-Pierre-et-Miquelon is entirely surrounded by Canada's EEZ. Mauritius claims EEZ for Tromelin from France and EEZ for British Indian Ocean Territory from the UK. Northern Cyprus claims a portion of Cyprus or EEZ overlaps with that of Northern Cyprus in the southeastern part of the Cyprus island. Turkey claims a portion of Cyprus's EEZ overlaps with its own EEZ. Lebanon claims that the agreement between Cyprus and Israel overlapped its own EEZ. Regions where a permanent ice shelf extends beyond the coastline are also a source of potential dispute. Transboundary stocks. Fisheries management, usually adhering to guidelines set by the FAO, provides significant practical mechanisms for the control of EEZs. Transboundary fish stocks are an important concept in this control. Transboundary stocks are fish stocks that range in the EEZs of at least two countries. Straddling stocks, on the other hand, range both within an EEZ as well as in the high seas outside any EEZ. A stock can be both transboundary and straddling. Exclusive economic zone by country. Argentina-Australia Season Submerged Lands Act 1973. Australia has the third largest exclusive economic zone, behind the United States and France, but ahead of Russia, with the total area actually exceeding that of its land territory. Per the UN Convention, Australia's EEZ generally extends 200 nautical miles from the coastline of Australia and its external territories, except where a maritime delimitation agreement exists with another state. The United Nations Commission on the Limits of the Continental Shelf confirmed, in April 2008, Australia's rights over an additional 2.5 million square kilometres of seabed beyond the limits of Australia's EEZ. Australia also claimed, in its submission to the UN Commission on the Limits of the Continental Shelf, additional continental shelf past its EEZ from the Australian Antarctic Territory, but these claims were deferred on Australia's request. However, Australia's EEZ from its Antarctic territory is approximately 2 million square kilometers. Brazil's EEZ includes areas around the Fernando de Noronha Islands, St. Paul and St. Peter Archipelago and the Trindade and Martim Islands. In 2004, the country submitted its claims to the United Nations Commission on the Limits of the Continental Shelf to extend its maritime continental margin. Canada is unusual in that its exclusive economic zone, covering 2,755,564 square kilometers, is slightly smaller than its territorial waters. The latter generally extend only 12 nautical miles from the shore, but also include inland marine waters such as Hudson Bay across the Gulf of St. Lawrence and the internal waters of the Arctic archipelago. Chile's EEZ includes areas around the Desventuradas Islands, Easter Island and the Juan Fernandez Islands. There is a dispute with Peru over the extent of Chile's EEZ. Chilean-Peruvian maritime dispute. China. The first figure excludes all disputed waters, while the last figure indicates China's claimed boundaries, and does not take into account neighboring powers' claims. Cyprus. The exclusive economic zone of Cyprus covers more than 70,000 square kilometers and is divided between 13 exploration blocks. The process of the establishment of Cyprus, Israel and Lebanon exclusive economic zones was held in Nicosia in 2010 with separate meetings between each country. Cyprus and Israel, as part of the wider cooperation, have agreed to start the gas explorations with a common American company, specifically Noble Energy. Cypriot and Israeli governments are discussing to export the natural gas through the shipping of compressed natural gas to Greece and then to the rest of Europe through a subsea pipeline starting from Israel and then leading to Greece via Cyprus. Denmark. The Kingdom of Denmark includes the constituent country of Greenland and the constituent country of the Faroe Islands. The EEZs of the latter two do not form part of the EEZ of the European Union. European Union. France. Due to its numerous overseas departments and territories scattered on all oceans of the planet, France possesses the largest EEZ in the world, covering 11,691,000 square kilometers. The EEZ of the United States is the second largest. The EEZ of France covers approximately 8% of the total surface of all the EEZs of the world, whereas the land area of the French Republic is only 0.45% of the total land area of the Earth. Note the EEZ column only adds up to 10,155,838 square km. All but the two smallest components of France's EEZ, territorial seas, match those at http://www.searoundus.org. Data #EEZ, which would be a better reference than the reference given, which only provides EEZ sizes for Australia. Greece. Greece has claimed an exclusive economic zone, as it is entitled to do so, as per UNCLOS 1982, as well as customary international law. According to published maps, the Israeli government has recognized the exclusive economic zones of Greece and Cyprus. They describe the course of the gas pipeline which will transfer gas produced by American Noble Energy Limited for the Leviathan Reservoir to Europe, through an undersea pipeline crossing Greece. The gas pipeline should traverse the sea area, which according to international law is part of the Greek EEZ. By this proposal, Israel recognizes the Greek EEZ in the area and offers an advantage that Greece can use during negotiation procedures to support its claims on the area. In practice, this cooperation will set up a powerful energy coalition between Greece, Cyprus and Israel. The mining and operating part will be undertaken by an American company. The substance of the issue is that in an effort to protect and secure vital Israeli interests in the Mediterranean Sea, Israel has been left with no choice other than to officially delimit its maritime borders. India 1,641,514 square kilometers, Andaman and Nicobar Islands 663,629 square kilometers, total 2,305,143 square kilometers. India is currently seeking to extend its EEZ to 350 miles. Israel. In 2010, an EEZ was set within the territorial waters between Israel and Cyprus at the maritime halfway point, a clarification essential for safeguarding Israelis' rights to oil and underwater gas reservoirs. The agreement was signed in Nicosia by Israeli Infrastructure Minister Uzi Landau and the Cypriot Foreign Minister Markos Kyprianou. The two countries agreed to cooperate in the development of any cross-border resources discovered, and to negotiate an agreement on dividing joint resources. Japan Minami Torishima 428,875 square kilometers. Ogasawara Islands 862,782 square kilometers. Pacific Ocean 1,162,334 square kilometers. Ryukyu Islands 1,394,676 square kilometers. Sea of Japan 630,721 square kilometers. Sea of Okhotsk, Little, total 4,479,358. Japan has disputes over its EEZ boundaries with all its Asian neighbors Russia, Republic of Korea, China and Taiwan. The above and relevant maps at the Sea Around Us project both indicate Japan's claimed boundaries, and do not take into account neighboring powers' claims. Japan also refers to various categories of shipping area, smooth water area, coasting area, major greater coasting area, ocean-going area, but it is unclear whether these are intended to have any territorial or economic implications. Mexico's exclusive economic zones comprise a total surface area of 3,144,295 square kilometers, and places Mexico among the countries with the largest areas in the world. New Zealand's EEZ covers 4,083,744 square kilometers, which is approximately 15 times the land area of the country. Sources vary significantly on the size of New Zealand's EEZ. For example, a recent government publication gave the area as roughly 4,300,000 square kilometers. These figures are for the EEZ of New Zealand proper, and do not include the EEZ of other territories in the realm of New Zealand. Norway has a large exclusive economic zone of 819,620 square kilometers around its coast. The country has a fishing zone of 1,878,953 square kilometers, including fishing zones around Svalbard and Jan Mayen. The fact that the European Union shares its economic zones was a big reason why Norway did not enter the EU as a member. In April 2009, the United Nations Commission for the Limits of the Continental Shelf approved Norway's claim to an additional 235,000 square kilometers of continental shelf. The Commission found that Norway and Russia both had valid claims over a portion of shelf in the Barents Sea. Poland. The Polish EEZ covers the area of 30,533 square kilometers within the Baltic Sea. Portugal has the 10th largest EEZ in the world. Presently, it is divided in 3 non-contiguous subzones. Continental Portugal 327,667 square kilometers. Azores 953,633 square kilometers. Madeira 446,108 square kilometers. Total 1,727,408 square kilometers. Portugal submitted a claim to extend its jurisdiction over additional 2.15 million square kilometers of the neighboring continental shelf in May 2009, resulting in an area with a total of more than 3,877,408 square kilometers. The submission, as well as a detailed map, can be found in the task group for the extension of the Continental Shelf website. Spain disputes the EEZ southern border, maintaining that it should be drawn halfway between Madeira and the Canary Islands. But Portugal exercises sovereignty over the Savage Islands, a small archipelago north of the Canaries, claiming an EEZ border further south. Spain objects, arguing that the Savage Islands do not have a separate continental shelf, citing Article 121 of the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. Russia, Kaliningrad 11,634, St. Petersburg 12,759, Barents Sea 1,308,140, Black Sea 66,854, Pacific 3,419,202, Siberia 3,277,292, total 8,095,881 square kilometers. Somalia 825,052 square kilometers. South Africa's EEZ includes both that next to the African mainland and that around the Prince Edward Islands, totaling 1,535,538 square kilometers. Mainland 1,068,659 square kilometers. Prince Edward Islands 466,879 square kilometers. South Korea area 300,851 square kilometers. United Kingdom. The United Kingdom's exclusive economic zone is the fifth largest in the world at 6,805,586 square km. It comprises the exclusive economic zones surrounding the United Kingdom, the Crown Dependencies, and the British Overseas Territories. The figure does not include the EEZ of the British Antarctic Territory. The exclusive economic zones associated with the Falkland Islands and South Georgia are disputed by Argentina. Only the United Kingdom and Gibraltar are part of the EU. The Channel Islands, the Isle of Man and the remaining overseas territories are not part of the EU. The United Kingdom has not as yet claimed its rights with regards to Gibraltar of the sovereign base areas in Cyprus, part of the overseas territory of St. Helena, Ascension and Tristan da Cunha, which together has an EEZ of 1,641,294 square km. United States. The United States' exclusive economic zone is the second largest in the world, covering 11,351,000 square kilometers. Areas of its EEZ are located in three oceans, the Gulf of Mexico, and the Caribbean Sea. Magnuson-Stevens Fishery Conservation and Management Act. The sizes of the components of the U.S. EEZ territorial seas are: Alaska 3,770,021 square kilometers, Hawaii, Northwest Islands 1,579,538 square kilometers, U.S. East Coast 915,763 square kilometers, Hawaii, Main Islands 895,346 square kilometers, U.S. West Coast 825,549 square kilometers, Northern Marianas 749,268 square kilometers, Mainland Gulf Coast 707,832 square kilometers, Johnston Atoll 442,635 square kilometers, Howland and Baker Islands 434,921 square kilometers, Wake Island 407,241 square kilometers, American Samoa 404,391 square kilometers. Palmyra Atoll and Kingman Reef 352,300 square kilometers. Jarvis Island 316,665 square kilometers. Guam 221,504 square kilometers. Puerto Rico 177,685 square kilometers. U.S. Virgin Islands 33,744 square kilometers. Total 11,351,000 square kilometers. Rankings by area. This list includes dependent territories within the sovereign states, but does not include claims on Antarctica. EEZ plus D is exclusive economic zone plus total internal area.